My name is Alara Vance. I'm 32 years old, and I am the founder of Etheria Dynamics. Just last month, my company, which helps businesses transition to sustainable practices, closed a funding round that put our valuation at $25 million. To my family, however, I was still the wayward daughter chasing a fanciful dream. So, when my father sent a terse message summoning me to an important family discussion, a familiar knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I had no idea they were gathering to stage an intervention for what they perceived as my floundering, irresponsible life choice. The email from Catalyst magazine, sitting unread in my inbox with the subject line "Confidential, your profile for visionaries 35 under 35, was about to change the landscape of our family forever. Before I tell you how my family's well-meaning but misguided attempt to save me from myself backfired in the most spectacular way, I invite you to join me on this journey. It's a story about building a business, yes, but more than that, it's about building a life on your own terms, even when the people you love most can't see the blueprints. Growing up in the old money enclave of Laurelhurst in Portland, Oregon, I was a wildflower in a meticulously cultivated garden. My father, Dr. Arthur Vance, is a renowned cardiac surgeon, a man who moves through the world with the quiet certainty that comes from holding life and death in his hands. He believes in proven paths, in prestige, in the reassuring weight of tradition. Security, Alara, he'd often say over dinners in our formal dining room, is the foundation upon which a worthy life is built. My mother, Eleanor, had been a promising art gallery curator before gracefully stepping back to orchestrate our perfect domestic world when my older sister, Chloe, was born. She curated our lives with the same discerning eye she once used for sculptures, valuing beauty, order, and social propriety above all else. Academically, I was everything they could have hoped for. My report cards were a string of flawless grades, my shelves lined with debate trophies and science fair ribbons. Yet, these achievements felt like offerings placed at the feet of gods who desired a different kind of tribute. Chloe was the daughter they understood. She was a perfect reflection of their values, attending Stanford as our father had wished, majoring in pre-law, and seamlessly transitioning to a top-tier law firm in the city. At holiday parties, my parents would glow, introducing Chloe, our daughter, the lawyer, while I was simply, "And this is our younger one, Alara." My own path diverged early. At 9, my stall at the farmer's market wasn't just about selling the lavender sachets I made from our garden. It was an exercise in supply chain management. I tracked inventory, calculated profit margins, and created tiered pricing for different-sized bundles. By 16, I was running a small online business reselling vintage clothing I sourced from estate sales, earning enough to open my first investment account. "It's lovely that you have these little ventures, dear," my mother would murmur, her hand patting my hair in a gesture that felt both affectionate and dismissive, even when I was a senior in high school. "But you must focus on activities that will look good on your applications." When I announced my intention to study business at Portland State University, the disappointment in our quiet, elegant home was palpable. My father had lobbied hard for an Ivy League liberal arts education, the traditional precursor to a professional degree. "Business is a trade, Alara, not an education," he argued, his voice laced with the frustration of a man whose logic was being ignored. The day my PSU acceptance letter arrived, my mother's sigh was more telling than any tears. "Portland State is a fine school," she said, her emphasis on fine a delicate dagger. "I just don't see why you wouldn't aim for Reed, at least." College, for me, was a breath of fresh, unconditioned air. I didn't just attend my business classes, I inhaled them. While my peers were discovering the city's nightlife, I was co-founding the university's first sustainable enterprise club, convincing local green business owners to come speak to our members. Professor Anya Sharma, a sharp, insightful woman with a background in impact investing, became the first adult in my life who saw my ambition not as a youthful phase, but as a defining characteristic. She became my mentor, the first person to truly see the architecture of my dreams. During my junior year, I interned at a small, struggling solar panel company. Within a month, I'd identified inefficiencies in their supply chain and drafted a new community outreach strategy. I presented my findings to my manager, my hands trembling slightly, and he, to his credit, passed them up to the CEO. 3 months later, after implementing several of my suggestions, the company posted its first profitable quarter in 2 years. I graduated with honors, armed with job offers from several large corporations. My parents had my future charted: take the most lucrative offer at the most prestigious company, climb the ladder, marry a suitable young man, preferably a doctor or lawyer, and settle into a comfortable, predictable life in a house much like the one I'd grown up in. The night of my graduation dinner, my father presented me with a leather-bound portfolio containing printouts of job listings at Nike and Intel, along with contacts he'd already made on my behalf. "This is your roadmap, Alara," he said, his confidence absolute. "Trust me. I know this world." I thanked him, the weight of his expectations heavy in my hands, knowing I had already accepted a junior analyst position at Verdant Ventures, a small but dynamic B Corp focused on funding sustainable startups. When I delivered the news over dessert, my father nearly dropped his fork. "You're turning down an offer from Intel for a company I've never heard of? For less than half the salary." His face, usually so composed, was flushed with a mixture of anger and bewilderment. "Arthur, please," my mother cautioned, placing a calming hand on his arm before turning a disappointed gaze on me. Alara has always had to learn things the hard way. My sister, Chloe, the family's resident diplomat, attempted to reframe it. "Maybe it's a good entry point, Dad. She can build her resume and then move to a more established company once she understands the need for long-term stability." That was my family in a nutshell, a loving, well-intentioned counsel incapable of imagining a definition of success that didn't mirror their own. At Verdant Ventures, I became a sponge. I stayed late, I volunteered for projects outside my purview, I learned every facet of how sustainable businesses were built, funded, and scaled. My evenings and weekends were consumed with developing my own concept, a tech platform that would provide small and medium-sized businesses with affordable, user-friendly tools to measure, manage, and report their environmental impact. Every Sunday dinner at my parents' became a gentle but persistent interrogation about when I would get a real job. When I shared an exciting breakthrough in my business plan, my father would seamlessly pivot to Chloe's latest case or her new boyfriend, a promising associate from her firm. The moment that crystallized my resolve came when I overheard my father on the phone with his brother. "Alara's still in her rebellious phase," he was saying, his voice a blend of amusement and resignation. "Playing at being a world saver instead of building a career. She'll come around once the realities of rent and mortgages set in." I was 27, with a meticulously researched business plan, a deep understanding of the market, and a fire in my belly. To my family, I was still a child playing dress-up in the world of adults. The final straw came from a loan officer at a major bank, who gave my business plan a cursory glance before shaking his head. "It's a nice idea," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "But the market for this is niche. Maybe come back when you have a few years of management experience. Or a co-founder with a more traditional tech background." That night, driving home through the rain-slicked Portland streets, I made a vow. I would not only succeed, but I would build something so undeniable, so fundamentally sound, that it would force them all to see. Success would not be my revenge, it would be my truth. With $20,000 of my own savings and a resolve forged in the quiet fire of dismissal, I quit my job at Verdant Ventures and incorporated Etheria Dynamics. When I told my parents over our customary Sunday dinner, my mother's hand flew to her chest. "You did what?" My father's voice was dangerously quiet, the calm before a storm of paternal disappointment. "I've started my own company," I repeated, my own voice steadier than I felt. "We're going to help small businesses become more sustainable." "We," my mother latched onto the word. "Who is we?" "Well, for now, it's me. But I'll be hiring." My father let out a short, sharp laugh, the one he reserved for things he found utterly preposterous. "Alara, be realistic. You'll exhaust your savings in 6 months. You have no real startup experience, no major investors, no collateral. This isn't how it's done." I have 5 years of industry experience, I have a network, and I have enough capital to launch, I countered, my voice rising. $20,000 isn't capital, he scoffed. It's a rounding error in a real business plan. I don't need your approval, I said, the words finally breaking free. I just need you to respect my decision. Respect is earned, Alara, he replied, his voice turning cold. And frankly, this choice is not respectable. I left their house that evening with my mother's worried voice following me to the door. We're just concerned for you, darling. But I was beginning to understand that in my family's language, concern and condescension were two sides of the same coin. My first office was a small, sun-starved room in the Ford building, a century-old industrial space in southeast Portland. The rent was manageable because the freight elevator was perpetually out of service and the shared bathroom was 2 doors down a drafty hallway. The walls were thin enough that I knew the kombucha brewing startup next door was having trouble with their SCOBY. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning need to prove my father wrong. My small apartment's dining table was my second desk, my living room floor a staging area for marketing materials. Sleep felt like an indulgence I couldn't afford. My first prospective client meeting was with a well-established local chain of coffee shops. I spent a week preparing a customized presentation, rehearsing my pitch until the words felt like a part of me. I arrived in my best secondhand blazer, convinced my meticulous research would win them over. 10 minutes in, the owner, a man with a weary, seen-it-all expression, held up a hand. This all sounds nice. But how many clients do you have? As a new venture, I'm currently onboarding my foundational partners, I answered, trying to sound confident. So, 0, he said, his tone flat. Look, kid, call me when you have a real portfolio. I sat in my car and wept, not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated frustration. It was the entrepreneur's catch, 22. You can't get clients without a track record, and you can't get a track record without clients. That evening, I scrapped my entire outreach strategy. If established businesses wanted proof, I needed to find clients who were as hungry as I was. I began targeting brand new businesses, artisan bakeries, independent bookstores, single-person consulting firms. I offered free initial carbon footprint assessments, showing them their environmental vulnerabilities and offering simple, low-cost solutions. It worked. My first paying client was a 2-person flower delivery service called Petal and Stem, run out of a garage. They couldn't afford much, but their enthusiastic testimonial led to another client, and then another. For months, I made just enough to cover my office rent and business expenses, but not a dollar for myself. I lived on lentils and rice, reinvesting every cent into Ethereum. The breakthrough came from a place I least expected it. I almost didn't go to a local green tech meetup because the $20 ticket felt like a splurge. There, I met Evelyn Reed, the retired CEO of a major renewable energy firm. After the panel discussion, I forced myself to approach her, my heart pounding. Your question about scaling impact was the most astute one of the night, she said, her eyes sharp and intelligent, before I could even finish my introduction. Tell me about what you're building. For the first time, someone with real-world, high-level experience listened to my vision not as a little project, but as a serious enterprise. Evelyn became my unofficial mentor. A week after we met, she connected me with the facilities manager of a mid-sized regional healthcare provider, a company she knew was looking to improve its sustainability metrics to attract younger talent. Their current consulting firm was charging them a fortune for boilerplate reports. After 3 meetings and a detailed, data-driven proposal, I landed my first major contract. It was enough to hire my first employee. Maya, a brilliant data analyst with a passion for environmental science, became my first hire. Her previous employer had consistently passed her over for promotions because she didn't have a traditional business degree. She saw the potential in Ethereum when I was still running it on fumes and faith. Together, in our tiny, dusty office, we refined the platform, creating the proprietary analytics dashboard that would become our signature offering. Just as we were gaining momentum, a larger, more established consulting firm swooped in and poached our healthcare client, undercutting our price by a fraction. Suddenly, our primary revenue stream vanished. We had enough operating capital for a month at best. Maybe this is a sign, dear, my mother suggested gently over the phone when I made the mistake of sharing my panic. You gave it your best. There's no shame in knowing when to stop. Instead of stopping, Maya and I went into overdrive. We worked around the clock, fueled by pizza and desperation, to fast-track a new feature for our platform, a tool that allowed businesses to not only track their impact but also connect directly with a vetted marketplace of local, sustainable suppliers. It was a Hail Mary. And it was caught. When a local newspaper ran a story on a citywide Buy Local, Buy Green initiative, we were perfectly positioned. We offered our new tool for free for the first 3 months. The response was overwhelming. Our phones didn't stop ringing. The Portland Business Journal wrote a small piece about our innovative model. Within 2 months, we had signed 20 new clients and hired 2 more people. 6 months after that, we celebrated our first truly profitable quarter. I bought a bottle of Oregon sparkling wine and 4 mismatched mugs from Goodwill, and we toasted our success under the flickering fluorescent lights of our office. When I called my parents to share the news, my mother's response was, "Oh, that's nice, darling," before immediately asking if I was dating anyone. My father was more direct. "A single quarter is an anomaly, Alara. Don't get ahead of yourself. Let's see if you can sustain it." My sister, Chloe, sent a one-word text, "Congrats." It was followed 5 minutes later by a picture of the engagement ring her boyfriend had just given her. At a family dinner to celebrate their engagement, my father tried to set me up with the son of one of his colleagues. "Alara is playing at running a little green company," my father explained to the young man, a real estate developer named Mark, while I sat there, my face burning with humiliation. "It's not playing when you're profitable and have a team of 4, I corrected him, my voice tight but even. Mark looked uncomfortable. "What kind of green stuff?" Before I could answer, my father waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's very niche. Complicated." I excused myself early that night, the sting of his words blurring the city lights as I drove home. Why was my success, built on my own terms, so invisible to them? The turning point came through Evelyn. She attended the small ceremony where Etheria won a local award for Most Innovative New Business. My parents were invited, but had a prior commitment, a dinner party with friends. Chloe sent her regrets via text. Standing on that small stage, holding a glass plaque, without a single member of my family present, I had a profound realization. I was building 2 things simultaneously, a company and the emotional fortitude to thrive without the one thing I had always sought, their approval. 3 years after Etheria's humble beginnings, we were a team of 25. Our analytics platform was gaining national attention for making corporate responsibility accessible and affordable. We had moved out of the Ford building and into a bright, airy office in the Pearl District, with large windows and ergonomic chairs. Our series of funding round had been a whirlwind, but we'd successfully raised $2.5 million from investors who shared our vision, thanks in large part to introductions made by Evelyn. Our client retention was at 95%, a number that was almost unheard of. My personal life, however, was a different story. At my cousin's wedding, I overheard my mother telling my aunt, "Alara's still doing that computer thing. We do worry. No benefits, no proper retirement plan." I wanted to march over and explain that our company benefits package was more generous than my sister's law firm's, but I held my tongue. In my family, facts were no match for long-held narratives. My father had taken to emailing me articles about startup failures and market downturns, each with a subject line like "food for thought" or "something to consider." The Thanksgiving dinner incident was a masterclass in their casual dismissal. I had just landed a major contract with a beloved regional grocery chain, a deal that beat out 2 national competitors. I arrived at my parents' home, buoyed by this success, feeling that this, finally, was an accomplishment they would have to acknowledge. As the turkey was being passed, my father turned to Chloe. "Tell us about the merger you're working on, sweetheart." She described the complex, high-stakes case, and my parents listened with rapt attention, their faces glowing with pride. When she finished, I saw my opening. Speaking of big deals, I began. Etheria just signed on as the sustainability partner for Market of Choice. The grocery store, my father asked, his tone making it sound small. They have 11 stores across the state, I clarified. It's a significant contract. He nodded, unimpressed. Interesting. Of course, with retail, the real challenge is scaling that kind of initiative nationally. He then turned to my brother-in-law, Marcus. Marcus, didn't your firm just advise on the Albertsons Safeway deal? Now that was a complex transaction. And just like that, my victory was erased, the conversation redirected. Later, while helping my mother clear the table, I heard her on the phone with her sister. No, Alara's still single. Too focused on that little company of hers, I suppose. I don't really understand what it is she does, to be honest. Chloe's engagement to Marcus, a man who fit my father's mold of success perfectly, only amplified the dynamic. Marcus, who had an MBA from Wharton and the unshakable confidence of someone who has never been truly challenged, had started offering me unsolicited business advice. You know, Alara, he said at their engagement party, swirling his wine, your business model is too service-heavy. You need to pivot to a pure SaaS model to achieve real scale. We've explored that, Marcus, I replied, keeping my voice level. Our clients value the combination of tech and personalized support. It's our key differentiator. Trust me, he said with a condescending wink. I run the numbers on these impact plays all the time. You leave money on the table without a scalable, low-touch model. I had to physically bite my tongue to stop myself from explaining that we were not only profitable, but that our growth was sustainable precisely because we rejected the growth at all costs mentality. What none of them knew, what I had intentionally kept secret to protect it from their skepticism, was that Evelyn had nominated me for Catalyst magazine's prestigious Visionaries 35 Under 35 list. The nomination itself felt like a dream. But I couldn't bear the thought of telling them. If I didn't make the list, their pitying, well, it was a long shot comments would be soul-crushing. And if, by some miracle, I did, I wanted the moment to be mine, whole and untarnished. Meanwhile, Etheria was flourishing. We were selected to lead a sustainability pilot program for the city of Portland, a highly competitive and public-facing project. Our team was a vibrant, committed group of people who had created a culture that valued innovation and well-being in equal measure. But even as my company thrived, I wrestled with a persistent imposter syndrome, a nagging inner voice that sounded uncannily like my father, whispering, "You got lucky. This can't last." The catalyst for the inevitable confrontation was an acquisition offer. Viridian Global, a massive tech conglomerate, approached us. The offer was staggering, enough to guarantee my financial security for the rest of my life. After a week of intense deliberation with my leadership team and Evelyn, I turned it down. Our mission wasn't complete. I wasn't ready to see my vision diluted and absorbed into a corporate machine. Somehow, my father found out. I suspect he had a contact at Viridian's investment bank. He called me, his voice tight with a barely controlled fury. "Alara, tell me the rumors aren't true. Tell me you didn't turn down the Viridian offer." "I did, Dad," I said calmly. "It wasn't the right move for the company." "Not the right move," he sputtered. "Do you have any concept of what you just threw away?" This is precisely the kind of impulsive, emotional decision-making that has us so worried. "Dad, I appreciate your concern, but this is my decision to make." "This isn't just about you," he exclaimed. "What about your employees? What about your own future? You could have been set for life." "We're building something for the long term," I said firmly. A long, heavy silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice was unervingly placid. "Your mother and I want you to come for dinner on Saturday. Chloe and Marcus will be there. We need to have a family discussion about your situation." "My situation?" I repeated, stunned. "Your business situation," he clarified. "We are concerned. And as your family, it's our responsibility to intervene before things get worse." I agreed to the dinner, mostly out of a sense of stunned disbelief. It was only after I hung up the phone that the reality sank in. They weren't just concerned. They were staging an intervention, treating my life's work like a dangerous addiction. The week leading up to that Saturday was a slow-motion nightmare. My mother sent texts asking if I'd reconsidered the Veridian offer and suggesting I be open-minded to Marcus's business acumen. Chloe called with a cryptic warning, "Just try to hear them out, Alara. They really do mean well." What none of them knew was that our new funding round had just closed, valuing our company at $25 million. What none of them knew was that the Catalyst list was being published online the following Monday. What none of them knew was that I had stopped needing their approval months ago. I just hadn't quite stopped wanting it. Saturday evening arrived with a crisp autumn chill that felt symbolic. As I drove to my parents' home in Laurelhurst, the house I grew up in, a wave of defiant calm washed over me. The perfectly sculpted hedges and symmetrical flower beds seemed to represent everything I had pushed against, a life of predictable, constrained order. I parked my practical hybrid behind Chloe's sleek Tesla and my father's polished Audi, a visual metaphor for my place in the family hierarchy. Taking a deep, grounding breath, I reminded myself of who I was now, the founder and CEO of a thriving company, a woman whose worth was not determined by her family's perception. My mother opened the door before I had a chance to ring the bell, her smile taut with anxiety. She was wearing her gray cashmere cardigan, the one reserved for serious family matters. It was another clear signal that this was not just dinner, it was a summit. "Alara, you made it," she said, her hug brief and tense. "Everyone is in the living room." I followed her down the familiar hallway, its walls a gallery of our family's curated history. I noticed a recent photo of Chloe and Marcus at a charity gala had replaced my college graduation picture. The message was clear. The living room furniture had been subtly rearranged, the sofas and armchairs forming a distinct semicircle facing the coffee table. It looked exactly like a scene from a movie about an intervention. My father was in his leather wingback chair, a manila folder resting on his lap. Chloe and Marcus sat together on the love seat, their expressions serious. An empty space on the sofa opposite them was clearly meant for me. "Alara," my father said, his voice formal. He didn't stand. "Thank you for coming." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, the ironic edge in my voice unmistakable as I took my designated seat. The air was thick with unspoken agendas. My mother fluttered about, offering drinks that no one accepted. My father cleared his throat, the sound that had always preceded a lecture. "We have asked you here tonight, Alara, because we are deeply concerned about the trajectory of your venture." "My company," I corrected him gently. "Etheria Dynamics." "Yes, your company," he conceded, the words sounding awkward on his tongue. "Your decision to refuse a substantial acquisition offer from a company like Veridian is, frankly, alarming. It suggests a profound lack of business judgment." He opened the folder and slid out a stack of papers. He had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, printed out. My father, the surgeon, was approaching my life like a complex medical case requiring intervention. "I've compiled some data on the failure rates of tech startups," he continued, passing a copy to each person. 80% fail within the first 5 years. In the green tech space, that number is even higher due to market volatility. I glanced at the first page, recognizing the cherry-picked, out-of-context statistics. Before I could respond, he pressed on. "We have supported this experiment of yours for long enough. But refusing a viable exit strategy is not just poor business, it's irresponsible." "Supported?" The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. "In what way, exactly, have you supported my company?" My mother leaned forward, her voice soft and patronizing. "Emotionally, dear. We've been worried sick, but we've respected your need to try this on for size." "Try this on for size?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Mom, this isn't a summer job. I have 25 employees. We have a national client base." Marcus cleared his throat, assuming the role of the expert. "Alara, from an investment perspective, the market is showing signs of a downturn. Niche sectors like sustainability tech are always the first to be hit during a contraction. Taking the Veridian offer would have been the prudent move." I turned my full attention to him. "And from a CEO's perspective, Marcus, our growth is accelerating because we're providing a solution the market desperately needs. Our position has never been stronger." "Alara," My father's voice cut in, sharp as a scalpel. I took the liberty of speaking to a friend of mine, David Chin at Columbia Capital. He paused, letting the name of the prominent venture capitalist hang in the air. He has agreed to take a look at your financials, to give us an objective, third-party assessment of your company's actual viability. The air left my lungs. The idea that my father had gone behind my back, discussing my company with his powerful friends, was a betrayal so profound it momentarily silenced me. You did what? It's a favor, he insisted, completely missing the point. David specializes in turning around distressed assets. We are not a distressed asset, I said, each word a carefully placed stone. Darling, my mother said, reaching for my hand. I instinctively pulled it away. We're just thinking of your future. If this company doesn't work out, and the statistics suggest it won't, you'll have a significant gap on your resume. Your old room is always here for you while you figure things out. The suggestion that at 32, after building a successful company from scratch, I might need to move back into my childhood bedroom was so profoundly insulting, so utterly disconnected from my reality, that I almost laughed. Chloe had been uncharacteristically silent, staring intently at her phone. Suddenly, her head shot up, her eyes wide with disbelief. She gasped. What is it, Chloe? My mother asked, startled. Chloe looked from her phone to me, her face a canvas of confusion and shock. Alara, why is your face all over the Catalyst magazine website? She turned her phone around. There, under the bold headline, Visionaries 35 Under 35, was a professionally shot photograph of me in my office. The room fell into a deafening silence. My father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother froze, her hand halfway to her pearls. Marcus leaned over, snatching the phone from Chloe's hand. Let me see that, my father finally choked out, taking the phone. He began to read aloud, his voice growing more strained with every word. Alara Vance, founder and CEO of Etheria Dynamics. At 32, Vance is revolutionizing how businesses approach environmental responsibility. Etheria, which Vance bootstrapped from her savings, recently closed a funding round valuing the company at $25 million. He trailed off, looking up at me, his expression one I had never seen before, a complete and total system failure of his worldview. $25 million, my mother whispered, the words barely audible. Your company is worth that much? As of our series A Close last month, yes, I confirmed, my voice as steady as a rock, though a tempest of emotions raged inside me. Marcus was now furiously typing on his own phone. It's real, he announced to the stunned room. There's a full profile on her. Industry impact analysis, client growth metrics. How did we not know any of this? You never asked, I said simply. You were all too busy preparing my eulogy to consider the possibility that I might actually be alive and well. My father was still holding Chloe's phone, staring at my picture as if it were an alien artifact. The photo shoot was last month, I added, my voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a quiet, sad certainty. They asked me to keep it confidential until the official launch on Monday. But the Viridian offer, my father stammered, trying to make the pieces fit. If you're this successful, why on earth would you turn it down? Because, I explained, standing up and feeling a sense of my own power for the first time in that house, I am building something of value. Something I believe in. It's the same reason I've made every single decision you have all questioned, doubted, and dismissed from the very beginning. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of years of misunderstanding. It was my mother who broke it, her voice small and wounded. We were only trying to help. I looked at my family, my brilliant, successful, loving, and completely blind family, and I felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of pity. I know you believe that, I said, my voice softer now. I picked up my bag. But real help, real love, has to start with respect. And not once have any of you respected me enough to believe that I could build this on my own. I walked to the front door, then paused and turned back, a small, wry smile touching my lips. The print issue of the magazine comes out next week. I'd be happy to sign a copy for you. And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, leaving them in the wreckage of their good intentions, their useless PowerPoint presentations scattered across the coffee table like fallen leaves. The drive back to my apartment in the city was a watercolor of blurred streetlights and colliding emotions. The vindication was sharp and sweet, but it had a bitter aftertaste of sorrow. I had finally gotten the acknowledgement I had spent my life craving, but it had come not from their faith in me, but from the undeniable, external validation of a magazine. Why did it take an article and a dollar figure for them to finally see me? Once home, I tossed my keys on the counter and sank onto my sofa, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. The tears that came were not of sadness or anger, but of release. It was the shedding of a skin, the letting go of a lifetime of trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and missed calls. I ignored them all until, close to midnight, Chloe's name appeared on the screen for the 5th time. I answered. "Alara," she started, her usual confident voice replaced with a hesitant, fragile tone. I'm so sorry." "For what, specifically?" I asked, not ready to make it easy. "For everything," she said, her voice cracking. "For sitting there while they planned your life. For never really asking. For being so caught up in my own approved path that I never bothered to look at yours. Congratulations, Alara. And I'm sorry." This apology, so direct and unadorned, chipped away at the wall I had built around my heart. "You didn't know," I said, softening. "I didn't look," she corrected. "There's a difference." She paused. "Can we get coffee? Sometime this week? I want you to tell me everything. The real story." I agreed, feeling the first, tentative shoots of a new kind of relationship with my sister beginning to grow. For the next 2 weeks, I maintained a deliberate silence with my parents. My father left voicemails that morphed from defensive justification. We were operating on the information we had to begrudging acknowledgement. That Catalyst article was impressive. My mother sent texts that vacillated between guilt. "Your father is beside himself," and a strange, newfound pride. I told Carol from my book club that my daughter is a visionary. I needed the space to let my own feelings settle, to find my new equilibrium without their influence. Professionally, the world shifted on its axis. The article acted as a powerful accelerant. My inbox was a flood of inquiries from investors, potential partners, and journalists. Evelyn was the first to call the morning the article went public. "I told you they'd see it eventually," she said, a deep satisfaction in her voice. "You belong in that spotlight, Alara." My team's reaction was the validation that truly mattered. We celebrated with champagne and pizza in our office, and I made it clear that this was a shared victory. Maya, my first employee, gave a toast that made my eyes well up. "To Alara," she said, raising her glass. "Who built a space for people like us to do meaningful work, and who never, ever let anyone tell her it couldn't be done." While my professional life soared, the personal wounds remained. I finally agreed to speak to my father after he sent a simple, 3-word email. I was wrong. The phone call was stilted. Apologies were not in his native tongue. "This recognition, it's quite something," he began, as if discussing a business acquaintance. "It is," I replied. "I may have misjudged the potential of your business model." "You did," I said, leaving no room for ambiguity. There was a long pause. "Your mother and I would like to take you out to a celebratory dinner." I gently declined. "I'm not ready for that yet, Dad." What happened that night, it was about more than just one dinner. It was about years of not being seen. An article doesn't just fix that. The surprise in his silence told me he truly didn't understand. He thought the public success should have been a balm that instantly healed all wounds, a testament to how little he still understood the nature of the injury. The coffee with Chloe, however, was a revelation. We met at a neutral cafe, and for the first time, we talked not as the perfect daughter and the rebellious one, but as two women who had navigated the same complex family system in different ways. "I was so envious of your courage," she confessed, stirring her latte. "I just did what was expected because it was easier. Safer. You chose the harder path, and I let Dad convince me it was the wrong one because it made my own safe choices feel more valid." This raw honesty from my sister, my lifelong rival, was more healing than any public accolade. In the midst of this recalibration, I began seeing a therapist, a woman who specialized in helping founders navigate the psychological pressures of their work. Your family's inability to validate you is never about you, Alara, she told me in one session. It was about their own fears and their own narrow definitions of a successful life. The work now is to build a relationship with them that acknowledges their limitations without letting those limitations define your worth. This question was on my mind as I prepared for my first major keynote address since the article at a national sustainability conference. Standing backstage, my heart thrumming with nervous energy, I received a text. It was from my father. Your mother and I are in the audience. Row 12. We're proud of you. As I stepped onto the stage, I scanned the crowd and found them. My mother, clutching her purse, looking around in awe at the massive auditorium. My father, sitting perfectly straight, his eyes fixed on me with an expression of intense focus. They had come, unannounced, to step into my world. After my speech, which was met with a standing ovation, I was swarmed by people. When the crowd finally thinned, I saw my parents waiting patiently at the back of the room. My mother hugged me, her embrace fierce. I didn't understand a word of the technical parts, she whispered, but you were magnificent. My father extended his hand, then seemed to reconsider, pulling me into a stiff, unfamiliar hug. That was remarkable, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Truly remarkable. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was the beginning of respect. A few months later, at Thanksgiving, the change was undeniable. My father asked detailed questions about our European market expansion strategy. My brother-in-law, Marcus, listened quietly. Most shockingly, Chloe announced she was leaving her law firm. I've been watching Alara, she explained to our stunned parents. And I realized I want to build something, not just advise on what others have built. I'm joining a small educational tech startup. My father looked at me, a flicker of his old alarm in his eyes, but he suppressed it. That's a bold move, he said to Chloe. I'm sure Alara has some valuable insights for you. That small deferral to my expertise was a tectonic shift. The most profound moment of healing came unexpectedly. One evening, my father invited me to study. I was cleaning out the attic, he said, handing me a faded, brittle folder. Inside was a detailed business plan, dated 1985, for a financial advisory firm aimed at middle-class families. You try to start a business? I asked, stunned. He nodded, his gaze distant. This was the dream. I quit my residency, my partner and I leased an office, and 3 months in, he backed out, the market turned, and we lost everything. Your mother was pregnant with you. I took the first secure job I could find, surgery, and I never looked back. He finally met my eyes, his own filled with a deep, ancient pain. When you started Etheria, all I could see was you, failing like I did. I was trying to protect you from this, he tapped the folder, by pushing you towards safety. I was wrong. The courage you had, the courage to keep going when everyone, especially me, was telling you to stop. I didn't have that. That confession didn't erase the years of hurt, but it reframed them. His dismissal wasn't about a lack of faith in me, it was about the deafening echoes of his own failure. Our family's story doesn't have a perfect storybook ending. It's a work in progress, a mosaic of repaired pieces. The real success wasn't the $25 million valuation or the magazine cover. It was the quiet conversation in my father's study. It was Chloe asking for my advice. It was my mother proudly telling her friends about my work. It was me learning that my worth was not something to be granted by others, but something to be built, defended, and owned by me. True validation, I learned, is the quiet, unshakable belief in yourself, even when you're the only one in the room who sees the vision.